Okay, we'll maybe get going. It's just a little after 7. Looks like we got about 38 or 40 people on the Zoom this evening. Just as way of introduction, welcome to the public forum number 4 for the Wakefield Memorial High School. My name is Shane Nolan. I'm the owner's project manager from Left Field. We have our designers SMMA on tonight, Brian Black and Helen Fantini. We also have Joe Bertrand, the chair of the building committee, and we have Superintendent Doug Lyons from Wakefield Public Schools. We're going to do a short presentation tonight. We're going to go through some of the processes and some of the designs, show you some of the work we've been doing over the last number of months on the high school project. We'd like to get through the slides and afterwards we'll do a question and answer. So if you can hold your questions until we finish, we'd appreciate that. Then we can either take questions through the raise hand function on the Zoom, or please ask a question, and we'll moderate and we'll try and get through everybody's questions. Presentation should take about 30 minutes, and then we'll have about 30 to 40 minutes for a Q&A after. So just as agenda tonight, the feasibility study. Wakefield has been invited by MSBA, the Massachusetts Schools Building Authority, to enter into a feasibility study for the new high school. We'll talk a little bit about the process and the schedule on that. And then we'll hand it over to SMMA to talk about the existing conditions of the building and the site, the existing high school site. And then we'll look at some of the conceptual design alternates that we've reviewed with the Wakefield Building Committee up to this point. Thank you, Brian. So the MSBA process, the MSBA consists of 8 modules, 8 different sections of what you need to go through in the MSBA program. Eligibility period is module number 1. Wakefield has completed that. They were invited into a feasibility study after that. Module 2 is forming the team. That's when Left Field were appointed as your project managers and SMMA were appointed as your designers. We are the team working with the Permanent Building Committee, School Building Committee, and the school department through this feasibility study. Right now we're in module 3. Just want to go back, Brian, I'll just go through this quickly. So module 3 was a feasibility study, and that's where we currently are. Once we finish the feasibility study, we'll move into schematic design. After that, module 5 is funding the project. That's when we're going to go to the town with a project approved by the state and look for town funding. If we get town funding, we will then proceed into detailed design, construction, building occupancy, and closeout. So right now we're in module 3 of the 8 modules, and we'll go into a bit more detail on module 3. Thanks, Brian. So module 3, the feasibility study. There's two submissions that we make to the state during feasibility study. The first one is the preliminary design program, the PDP, and the second one is preferred schematic design. We've been working on the preliminary design program since September when SMMA were appointed to the project. The preliminary design program is very much a fact and information gathering exercise. We've looked at existing conditions, which SMMA will report on tonight. We look at educational program. We did, over the course of the PDP, we did have 4 education workshops, visioning workshops. About 40 people participated in those, so we will publish the results of that. We do an initial space summary. So as part of the MSBA's program, we put together a space summary. The space summary will inform us of the number of classrooms, the number of science rooms, how big the gymnasium will be, how big the kitchen cafeteria will be, art rooms, and so forth on that. So we've started that process. We're working through that, and we will submit that to MSBA with the preliminary design program. We'll continue to refine that as we go into preferred schematic design. And finally, we've been evaluating different options. So we've looked at a number of options for either renovation projects, renovation addition projects, or new construction. All of these options have been on the existing high school site. Obviously looked at renovation and addition at the existing building. We've looked at some options for building new on the Wakefield across the road from Hemlock. And we've also looked at some new options on the Beasley Oval, and SMMA will get into that a little bit later this evening. So right now we're working towards wrapping up that preliminary design program. We have a building committee meeting next week where we hope that they will approve the submission of that, and we expect to submit that preliminary design program to MSBA on February 3rd. When that goes in, we'll move straight into our preferred schematic design. We will take some of those options we look at tonight, we'll develop those a bit further. We'll provide more detail to the building committee so that they can make a determination of what the best solution moving forward is, and that's what we call the preferred option. Once we finish preferred schematic design, we submit that to the MSBA. There'll be a series of meetings with them. We go to the MSBA FAS, which is a facilities assessment subcommittee. We review the project with them, and if they are okay with the project, they will recommend it for approval at the MSBA board, which we expect will happen in June of 2022. So two submissions, the first of which is going to go in the next couple of weeks to MSBA. Second will go in sometime in May in anticipation of going to the MSBA board in June of 22. Just some background of what we've done so far. As I said, we've done a number of educational visioning workshops. We've done programming with the staff and teachers at the school. This is the fourth public forum. Actually, we've had three altogether. Two during the feasibility study. This is the third during the feasibility study, and we did one way back before the designers were hired. And we've also had 7 public permanent building committee meetings to date. And as I said, the 8th meeting will happen next Thursday at 7 o'clock. Next slide, Brian. So moving into schematic design, after we get that approval at the end of preferred schematic from MSBA, the schematic design will be one design option that we progress and develop into some detail. At the end of schematic design, that's when we will establish the exact scope of the project, what the budget of the project will be, and what the schedule will be. By scope, I mean the size of the project, what will be included in the school, the spaces. It will include all the site work and any development on the high school property. The budget, at that point, we will know exactly how much it's going to cost the town. We will know the MSBA's reimbursement. The MSBA reimburses a certain portion of the cost of this school. That will be established with MSBA at the end of schematic design, exactly how much they're going to reimburse. And finally, we'll know the schedule. We'll know the schedule moving forward from the MSBA in terms of detailed design, construction, and when we expect the school to open. So that schematic design will happen from June of this year to December of 22. As I mentioned, after the schematic design, we'll move into module 5, which is funding the project. That's when we're going to come to the town and look for approval. We'll know the scope, we'll know the budget, we'll know the schedule, we'll know what the town's portion of the project cost is going to be, and we'll know exactly what the MSBA's reimbursement of the project cost is going to be. So we expect that to happen sometime in early 2023. We're going to work with the town and figure out an exact date when we'll have a town meeting and a vote to approve the funding of the project. And as I said, pending approval of the project, we'll move into our detailed design and construction after that. Next slide, Brian. So just a linear look at our schedule. As I said, we've finished forming the team. We're on board now for the feasibility study. We're working through the preliminary design program. We'll submit that early February on schedule. We'll continue right into that PSR, preferred schematic report, while MSBA are reviewing the PDP. We'll take on board any comments that they get back by the end of February, and we'll incorporate those into the PSR before we submit that in May of this year and go to the MSBA board in June of 22 to carry on one design option to schematic, bring that through to the end of the year to the board meeting at MSBA in December of 22. And we just show the funding. Town approval is in January, February of 23. So we have followed this schedule. We've been on schedule, and we will make the first milestone submission to MSBA on February 3rd in a couple of weeks. Thank you, Brian. So I'll now hand it over to SMMA, our designers, to look at the existing conditions and some of the design options.
Great, thanks, Shane. My name is Helen Fantini. As Shane had mentioned at the top of the meeting, I do want to introduce my teammates here, both Brian Black, architect and designer for the project, and we also have Mike Dowhan, our landscape architect, with us this evening. So as Shane has noted, this is very much the getting to know you phase of the project, both your hopes and dreams educationally, all the visioning that we've done, the space planning, the programming that we've been doing with Doug and Amy and all the teachers at the high school. But the other piece of this is very much learning about the physical conditions, both of the building and of the site. So in terms of the building itself, we had a team of architects and engineers descend upon the building a few months ago to really go through it. We were able to obtain existing conditions drawings and do surveys. And what we've learned is that, most of the systems in the building are at the end of their useful life. The district has done a great job of keeping the building up and running, but we are looking at a 1960 era middle school building at the center of your high school campus with two 1970s additions. So, very much the wear and tear of those years is showing in the envelope. The roof, there's, difficulty at the transitions on the roof. There's water infiltration. Again, very much at the end of its useful life and not functioning optimally to meet, new energy codes. So, this is the right time to be looking at this project. Also, in terms of the building, we did conduct a hazardous materials survey, both a visual survey as well as history documentation that the district has kept over the years, and some limited testing. So again, all of this information we take in, and it helps us move a project forward and make some smart decisions. Next slide. I'm going to hand it off to Mike to talk about some of the site testing.
Great, thanks, Helen. So, like Helen said, we're sort of in the shake hands with the site, get to know you kind of position with the site. A lot of it has to do with the things that we can see above ground. A lot of it has to do with the elements that we can't see, and we're trying to make sure that we have a really good grasp and understanding of what's going on beneath the site as well, or beneath the entire campus as well. So. As part of that, there's a few items that we're walking through right now, and all of this is happening concurrently with all these studies that you're going to be seeing in a few minutes. We're conducting a phase 1 environmental site assessment at the moment. That's underway. We've been out to the site to look at resource areas and flag some wetlands. There are 3 real major areas of resource areas, wetlands, sort of to the south, just beyond left field, Walsh Field, to the east, just beyond Beasley Oval, and sort of to the north, just beyond, there you go, right at the top, past the softball field and Woodville School. So we're looking at those areas. We've got those all flagged now. We understand where those edges are. We understand what the setbacks are going to be. So that's starting to inform some of our decisions. We've also started conducting geotechnical investigations. Those blue dots that I hope you can all see on the screen, those are a series of geoprobes so we can figure out what the soil condition and subsurface conditions are through here. Concurrent with all of that are 2 really important elements of our understanding of the site. One is an existing condition survey that we're having developed. It's partially done. We're pretty close to having that done. And that, of course, allows us to understand exactly what's going on in terms of both 2-dimensionally and 3-dimensionally what's happening with the site, so that we can start to gain and understand a more 3-dimensional understanding of the vertical separation and features of the site. Concurrent to that, we have a consultant working on an existing conditions traffic analysis. So we're looking at what's going on Farm Street, Hemlock Road, and then everything else all around us as well. So we have an understanding of what the traffic situation is and what we can do to mitigate it. We'll go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit slightly deeper dive and sort of maybe the more surface and more very obvious elements to us. So we create these site analyses that start to inform sort of the program, the site program and building program, or at least building location process. Hopefully you're all oriented here and you understand what we're looking at, that you can see the existing building there in sort of tan towards the top of your screen. And then in the lighter green are all the existing athletic fields, Blatz Burnett softball field, Beasley Oval, Walsh Field, and of course a little further up to the east, Landrigan and the associated parking lot. I should probably mention now that Landrigan Field and its associated parking lot are not part of this project. Woodville School, the parking lot in front of it, and the access drive behind it are also not part of this project. Thank you. Yeah, right through there. So those are separate, and those are going to remain as is. Everything else is sort of part of the project area. Again, you can see the wetland boundaries and the buffer zones for the wetlands that will obviously have some say in where we would site buildings. There's some steep slopes, obviously, as you know, when you're out there, you can see there's some really steep slopes over by where the ropes course is. And then over by Beasley Oval, there's some steep slopes and probably some ledge. We think some ledge too. So, we probably want to stay away from those areas too. Everyone knows that there's some grade change here too. So if you think about sort of, if you consider Farm Street as like a datum of 0, the building towards the back of the building, as you get west along there towards the back of the building, the grade drops by about 10 feet to where Beasley Oval is in the existing parking lot. Walsh Field is up a little higher, probably at about the same level as Farm Street. And then of course, as you move east along Hemlock Road, of course, the road starts to move up higher and higher. So there's a little bit of grade change in there, that we understand that, and we understand that we have to mitigate that. So that's part of that's part of our program process. Finally, you can see those boring locations along here again. 2 other things. There's a existing culvert that runs, basically bisects the site. As you can see, that blue dashed line that you see through the middle of the site. There's a stream, or possibly 2 streams, that go into a culvert over by left field, Walsh Field, go under Walsh, cross under Hemlock, and sort of bisect between Beasley Oval and the existing building. And then they daylight again north of Blatz Burnett Field. We understand that the approximate location of that, will have a much better understanding of the precise location of that once the survey is completed. But we know that's there, and we know that that's something we have to deal with. And the other element of our site analysis is we've heard a lot of early feedback about Hemlock Road and the issues with the sort of offset staggered intersection on Farm Street. So you'll see in some of the slides that follow that we're also taking into consideration a realignment of Hemlock Road as a means to try to clean up the traffic, but also try to gain us some additional space if necessary.
Thank you, Mike. I'm Brian Black. Happy to be with you all this evening. Thank you for joining tonight to see the work that the team has put together to be part of the PDP submission that Shane talked about. I'm going to sort of walk you through the current status of the investigations, which are really using a lot of the information that we've been gathering from these sites. As Mike mentioned, these parcels, the existing high school footprint, Beasley Oval, Walsh Field, these are 3 sort of primary locations that we've been studying as possible locations for the new or renovated high school. And the constraints here are, I think, pretty clear. It's a series of roads, property lines, wetlands, existing buildings. So each parcel is going to have pros and cons to it. And the team has been diligently tracking the pros and cons for each of these concepts as we move through. And I'll share with you a bit of the narrowing of the options as we come closer to the submission to MSBA. we're talking about 11 options that will be submitted as part of the PDP. There have been a series of meetings with the building committee and other stakeholders in which the advantages and disadvantages of each one have been thoroughly vetted, and there is a preference now for 3 of these options to be carried through. The MSBA requires a minimum of 3 options to be designated as those preferred to go into the next round after the February submission into the PSR stage, which is still more study before we come to one option that will be focused on for schematic design. This first slide is capturing 5 options, the first being a code upgrade only, so bringing the building up in terms of making it safe, habitable, and accessible. And then the number 2 series, A, B, C, and D, are an array of sort of different scales of renovation of the existing structure that provides, for all intents and purposes, a new building with many of the preferred adjacencies and characteristics that have been identified in the educational visioning process. The next slide is a series of 6 options, 3 of which, the 3 series A, B, and C, have new buildings sited on the Beasley Oval, with the oval being reconstructed after the existing high school is demolished. So that basically swapping positions with Beasley Oval. The 4 series, A, B, and C, were studied as a new building on Walsh Field and the tennis courts adjacent, and then rebuilding those facilities back again on the current high school site. As we move through, we can see there were a series of criteria, 22 in all, that were developed to evaluate each of these options. And these were discussed quite thoroughly. They cut across all of the sort of major goals of the project, from educational, meaning meeting all the needs educationally of the students, providing for growth, and fundamentally working within the framework of the guiding principles that have been established in the visioning. So what we, SMMA, have been doing most recently in schools is designing for 21st century education, which is moving toward the direction of more student-focused, student-centered, with more choice in education. And the facility really should reflect that, and so is part of each of the concepts that we've been showing. In terms of the building, it needs to be high-performing and well-oriented. The community aspects of the project are important. So providing community uses and spaces that can be used after hours and able to be made safe and secure. Minimal disruptions to neighbors and abutters was a high priority when looking at these alternatives. On the site, obviously parking and access via vehicles and pedestrians is something we look at quite a bit. So there are 7 criteria within site that the team looked at. These also include the potential realignment of Hemlock Road, which we carry in each of the schemes except the one that is the code upgrade only. There are obviously proximity to resource areas and the need for additional infrastructure for some of these sites. The building will be sustainable. It will achieve a high level of energy efficiency. And we strive for passive solar orientation such that when the building is oriented in the best location and proportion, we're better able to control solar gains. The sites that we're working with have limited capacity for optimizing, and I think we'll see our scorecard in a second, how that sort of plays out. And then cost and schedule are definitely part of the equation as well. So I hope you can see the edges of this diagram, but it's a lot to take in. But what it is the 22 evaluation criteria applied to the 11 options. And so the team devised a color coding system where the green denotes a favorable grade, basically, for the criteria for each option. Yellow is neutral and red is unfavorable. So you start to get a sense when viewing this, which options sort of carry more green and are better suited to certain of the components or criteria that I just went through. Just to sort of briefly touch on some of the implications here, the new building options are on the right half of the screen. And so those are typically better suited for optimizing the potential of adjacencies and sort of just placing program where it's best suited and best used in relation to the whole composition. The exception there are 3A and 4A, which were the model school options. So taking building designs that have been built previously and replicating them for Wakefield and modifying the program slightly. So it was felt that those models don't really deliver some aspects of the educational program. And so that being a very high priority for the project meant that those two options received red marks. Similar happens in the site evaluation, again, between the 3 series and 4 series options, sort of down here, if I can grab the cursor. So the 4 series, which are looking at Walshfield, were found to be less desirable than Beasley Oval in the topics of additional infrastructure being needed. So realignment of Hemlock Road being necessary in the 4 options to create a larger footprint for the building. And also in terms of the access, vehicular access is quite difficult at Walshfield because simply there's not much dimension to get off of Farm Street and to clear the queuing of the traffic before you're in the driveway of the school. So those were somewhat limiting factors, just to give you a sense and not to go through every topic. But there is a method to the evaluation that helped the discussion along quite a bit. I'll show you the 3 options or alternatives that are being promoted to be the ones that carry through to the next stage. The first is the code upgrade option. So it's a renovation of the existing high school in place that brings it up to current codes for life safety, energy performance, accessibility, and mechanical. And entails really a gut renovation of the school. As Helen mentioned, many of the systems are approaching their end of their useful life. The envelope needs really a complete revamp and major sort of fortification in order to meet current energy standards. Accessibility is quite a big issue as well. So this option can really deal with all of those shortcomings. What it cannot do is deliver really a change to the educational patterns of a 1960s and 1970s building, which would be in this option really kind of stamped into place for many decades more. So it would be unable to deliver adjacencies and proper space allocation. It is simply what it says. It's a code upgrade of the building. The cost here should also be measured in terms of displacement and really the need for swing space during the construction. So that is quite a hurdle, and it's something that many municipalities do, but it is one that is certainly on the negative side for looking at this option. On the positive side, the remaining field resources remain basically untouched. Perhaps if Beasley Oval, for example, were used to house the modulars, the resurfacing might be absorbed within a project. The second option that the committee chose to promote forward is number 2A, which is an addition renovation of the existing high school. It takes the facility structure as it is, removes the eastern portion of it to create a more generous sort of gathering space in the front of the building between it and Farm Street. The light orange elements are portions of the building that are renovated. The dark orange are new portions of the building that are built basically within the existing courtyard. So it's an expansion, not outward, but actually inward. And the building becomes a little bit more dense. So new auditorium facility, new dining commons, new educational wing with basically a pass-through of the building from front to back out toward Beasley Oval, and sort of a commanding view of the field, with the change of level being negotiated sort of within the building structure. There is about a 10-foot or potentially 10 to 15-foot change in grade between the front and the back of the building. So this would be an opportunity to address that and make both sides really a sort of front, if you will. Again, temporary facilities are needed for this, modular classrooms. The need to rebuild fields is not part of these options. So again, that is a little bit of a savings versus going to an all new construction. Moving to the new building option 3B. So again, this is a new building on Beasley Oval, reconstructing the oval toward Farm Street. There is, again, a change of grade between Farm Street and the site. So the thinking is that that happens somewhere closer to Farm Street, and then the oval is on the same surface basically as the front of the school. So it acts as sort of a field, if you will. So the building is pushed back a bit more relative to the current high school when viewed from Farm Street, but we feel it still has a strong commanding view of the site, of the campus, and the possibility for circulation, traffic coming in, getting off the main public roads and into the drop-off is much greater than it would be for sites on buildings on Walsh Field. Again, the constraints here are real. So it's a large building that is between the existing building, high school, which would be kept in place during the construction, and that building demolished only after construction is completed. And as you can see on the east side, we're hemmed in a bit by the wetland. So we, the result of that is basically a primarily north-south running building. It would have 3 stories of educational wings. And then the sort of Y shape on the middle is basically the space that receives. It's the dining commons, which could transition to other large sort of community use spaces within it. So that is the primary sort of beacon of the building. Those are the 3 sort of alternatives that, again, have been narrowed down. And, I think the team has worked hard to get to this point where it's exciting, actually, to see some substantive differences between options. And I think the team is eager to continue investigations really into the next stage.
Great, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Helen, and Mike also. So we hope that gives folks an idea of the work we've done to date, where we're moving forward. As Brian said, we propose moving forward with these 3 options to MSBA into the preferred schematic report, where we will go into more detail and develop those options. And at the end of preferred schematic, we will pick one of those 3 options to be the project, submit that for approval to the state in June of 2022. So with that, we can open it up to questions. We can, if we want to stop sharing, Brian, we can either use the chat function. There is a couple of questions that we'll answer in a moment, or certainly feel free to ask any questions. I have a couple. So Pedro asked, is there a possibility of pooling resources with the upcoming VOTEC project? I would say there isn't. Our proposal is to reinstate any fields that we disturb in kind. If we do end up doing the new construction, we will reinstate the Beasley Oval in front of it on the location of the existing school. And when we looked at the Wakefield, we were going to reinstate that and the tennis courts also. So I don't think there's any plan to pool resources with the VOTEC project. My understanding with that is it's already been approved by the MSBA, which, as I explained earlier, that means that the scope, the budget, and the schedule has already been established. So I don't think there will be any opportunity to do that on this project. With a question from Steve, are any of the options able to be net zero? We do have a series of focus groups also looking at specific topics on this project. One of those is a mechanical and sustainability group. We've had a couple of meetings with those guys. Certainly we are open to looking at a net zero option. We have a pretty aggressive EUI, which is energy usage index of about 20, I think, Helen, 26 or 27. So this building would be very efficient. There are people from the Light and Power Board sit on that sustainability subcommittee or focus group. So we've been discussing it with them. So it's absolutely something we're looking at, but we haven't established whether it will be net zero or not yet. That will happen during the PSR stage. Another question from Rachel's father. Are you able to discuss new roads going into the VOTEC? We're not involved in SMMA, are not involved with the VOTEC project, but my understanding is that they are looking to bring a new access road out of that site onto another location on Farm Street, which will mean that they won't be using Hemlock as their main access to their school anymore. So we haven't talked to them about that, but that's my understanding, is that they're looking to relocate their access road to another point on Farm Street. That will free up and reduce the traffic, we hope, on Hemlock. And at some point during the PSR, we'll also talk to DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation, who actually maintain and operate that road, about relocating it. So will be a conversation with DCR, but not the VOTEC. Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand, or certainly type it into the chat and I can read them out.
There's a bunch more in the chat.
So nothing now. Please consider methods to expand parking. Forestry is a hazard with on-street parking. We understand that. Right now, we've committed to, at the very least, matching the number of parking spaces. When we do start developing the site later on during the design, we will certainly look to increase that. We've talked to the superintendent about the parking policies with staff and students, something we're going to look at. My understanding is right now students, a lot of students park out on Farm Street, that there's no restriction there. So we will be looking at the existing parking, at the very least retaining that and hopefully increasing that, and looking at different parking policies for students and staff in the new school. I will say we've also looked at part of the criteria that Brian went through. We looked at the parking for the public during public events. So access to an auditorium, access to the fields outside of school hours, that's also been part of the conversation on parking, and that will continue. Question from Josh: are there any other town properties that were considered? This site seems very constrained and limited. We understand that there are no other town sites available that can fit a high school and all the athletic fields. So we did look into that, but there were no viable sites in town that were available. Question from Robert: are we going up to a 3-4-story building to maximize overall site size? Maybe Brian, you can address that.
Yes, we're currently assuming a 3-story building. I would say we should take a conservative approach and say it's a minimum of 3 stories. The sites are quite constrained. Our building is approaching 3 acres on its own, and so there is a need to build a little bit vertically, where 3 stories is not unusual in schools around the Boston area. We've done a couple of buildings, high schools lately, that are 4 stories and more. Somerville High School is a recent one that is quite unusual, being an urban site, and had to go actually 5 to 6 stories. But we think that 3 stories is reasonable.
Thank you, Ryan. Question from Melissa, or comment: in the first option, safety issues are taken into consideration, but not educational goals. Does this mean the science labs will not be upgraded? Right now, we're looking at an extensive renovation there, so it'll probably be a gut renovation. So I would expect that those science labs will be upgraded in the option 1, the first option. Denise, with 3B, the building appears close to the wetlands. If we have another rainstorm like we did in Mother's Day several years ago, are we looking at flooding in the building? Mike, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. So they are close, but I would ask you to consider the scale of the drawings that we're looking at right now. We're holding any kind of building footprint a minimum of 50 feet from any edge of wetlands. The finished floor elevations of the building will always be higher than any of the elevations of the surrounding wetlands, and we'll be doing plenty of stormwater management reports, stormwater management investigations and things like that. And I would not anticipate any flooding issues with the building with its proximity to any of the resource areas.
Great. Next question from Pedro. Who ultimately decides which option moves forward and how can we make our opinions heard? Well, the building committee has been tasked with overseeing the project on behalf of the town. The building committee is made up of 36 members, including members of the permanent building committee from Wakefield. So they will ultimately make the decision. As I said, we move into schematic design or into preferred schematic design. At the end of preferred schematic design, the building committee will make a decision on which one they want to bring to schematic. At that point, we will present that to MSBA. MSBA will have to approve that to allow us to bring that option into schematic design. Again, at the end of schematic design, the building committee will vote to approve the submission to MSBA, and MSBA's board will approve the project. And then early in 2024, we'll bring it to the town for a town vote. So building committee is overseeing it on behalf of the town. There are different approvals along the way through the building committee, MSBA. Ultimately, the town will need to approve it for the funding early 2024. And also just how can we make our opinions heard? The building committee does meet regularly every other Thursday night. Those meetings are posted on the town website. There's also a project website. It's wakefieldmhsproject.com. Our agendas and links to the Zoom meetings every other Thursday to the building committee are posted on that. They're public meetings. So please check that website, check the town website. You can attend those public meetings, and we will have a number of public forums also as we move forward through the PSR. So plenty of opportunities to let your opinions be heard. On the website, there is also a function where you can ask questions. There's an email address, so feel free to go in, submit your questions, and we will answer them, or we will bring them up to the building committee and address them at the building committee level. So plenty of room. Again, that's Wakefield MHS, Wakefield's Memorial High School Project.com. Building committee meets every other Thursday night. Please check the website for agendas and information on attending those through Zoom. And please feel free to jump in if I'm not answering your questions. I'm just trying to get through the questions on the chat. Are there any aspects of the project that are not eligible for MSBA funding? There are. There's a number of under the MSBA regulations. There's a number of caps. There's a number of limits, and then there's some things that just are categorically not eligible for reimbursement. This will be a topic that we're going to bring up with the building committee in the next couple of meetings. We'll also bring that up at a future public meeting, but just some of the major things. I would say MSBA reimburses construction costs. There's a cap on that of $360 a square foot. Construction costs are a lot higher than $360 a square foot, but 360 is the MSBA cap. So that's something. Anything over $360 is not reimbursed by MSBA. MSBA caps the site work and the site development at 8% of the construction cost. Very often the site costs exceed that 8%. So anything over that 8% will not be reimbursed by MSBA. And then there's also caps on designer fees, on OPM fees. There's some costs that are categorically not eligible. One of the big costs that we're looking at in two of our options anyway is swing space or modular space. If we do a renovation, in all likelihood, we'll have to bring in some sort of modular classroom setup. That will be very, very expensive, and MSBA does not contribute or participate any reimbursement to those costs. So there is a lot of costs that are not eligible. We will go into more detail with the building committee at a future public meeting on that, but certainly there are ineligible costs on the project. Savleta asks, what is the square foot of the 3B compared to now?
Yep.
Do you want
I
to?
can answer that,
Helen?
Shane. Yeah, sure. Svetlana, the existing building is approximately 250,000 square feet, and option 3B is around 275. So it is larger. As we submit the PDP to the MSBA, you know, they may try to press and push back on some of the square footages. But again, the option 3B is approximately 275,000 square feet.
Is there any thought to be able to use the roof as either an additional field option or an outdoor common area? Maybe one of our designers can address that.
Sure. The roof is a very attractive location to program for outside use. Probably less likely to be as large as a field. More likely to be used as terraces, breakout space, outdoor classrooms, and potentially outdoor lab space for things like environmental science. Sometimes there might be a greenhouse associated with such facilities. But yes, on a site that's constrained, you look to recreate the ground up high on the building. That can be a nice amenity with some associated costs. So we'll have to explore that as we go further down the road.
Question from Josh. Could you explain the future 30,000 square foot fieldhouse option? Is the fieldhouse not part of this project? Again, going back to some of the MSBA, what they allow and what they reimburse. Under MSBA regulations, they will allow a 12,000 square foot gym. Depending on the school population, our school population is, our design enrollment is 1,000 students. So they may allow up to an 18,000 square foot gym under their program. We've been asked to study a 30,000 square foot gym. If MSBA do allow us to do that, they will not reimburse the additional 12,000, the 12,000 over the 18 that they allow. So yes, a gym or a field house absolutely will be part of the project, but right now we're looking at what the size of that facility will be and what will be allowed and what will be reimbursable by MSBA.
Can I ask a quick question? What's the square footage of the existing field house?
It's 17,000 square feet.
Okay.
So we're looking to replicate that at 18,000 and possibly go up to 30,000.
Okay, thank you.
Neil, would it be cheaper to make the building more of a rectangular shape and add a floor or two? Maybe our designers can discuss the design of making it more rectangular, and I can talk about the cost.
Sure. I think, yes, rectangular buildings are economical in terms of the construction methods that are used to build it. The building that we design will ultimately be the result of the needs of the educational purpose of the building, which in some cases wants to sort of open up and create either more surface area or large openings to the outside. Or it may be that our site dictates that a certain angle is needed in order to fit everything in. So yes, we will look for a very economical way of building. It may not necessarily be a rectangular shape. We have Waltham High School going up right now. The steel is being erected. It's going quite fast because although it's a curved building, it's a very modular building. And so there's a lot of repetition and fairly straightforward in terms of the construction method.
Denise asks, will the entire building be for education or will the superintendent and administration still be in the building? Right now, we are looking to accommodate the district office, the superintendent's office. We've included that within that square footage that Helen just mentioned, the 275,000 square foot new building, or in the renovation option, renovating the superintendent's office. So right now that is in the project, and we'll continue to review that and look at options and whether the superintendent stays on site. Pedro, thank you. This has been very helpful. 3B seems like the best way to catch up 50 years from 1960, ideally to take us to another 50 years. Thank you, Pedro. Savlana, love the roof idea, worry about safety. I think Brian, certainly where we put anything on the roof, we do take safety in consideration, and we've certainly put up fences and that on any terracing, right?
Yes.
Are you considering options of installing solar to offset the energy consumption? As I mentioned earlier, we do have a focus group that's looking at sustainability. It is one of the things we're discussing. We are discussing it also with the power and light company, the local Wakefield power and light company. So it's something we're going to continue exploring and look to make this building as efficient as possible, including offsetting the energy consumption through PV panels. So all the questions I see, feel free to raise your hand or type any more in. Anybody?
I'll just make a comment. I asked about the, net zero, and I think with, the climate change issues that we're facing, and, building a building that's going to be here for, hopefully another 50 years, I would really encourage you to look very strongly at maximizing not only the efficiency of the building, but, renewable energy sources that we could use to get it to either net zero, as close to net zero as possible. Solar, PV, and geothermal, and even solar building materials on the exterior of the building can, siding can be looked at. So I'd encourage you to look at all those very strongly. Thank you. Sure.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we I believe, Helen, and correct me if I'm wrong, we are going to have a minimum of 2/3 of the roof area will be available for PV, either through this project or in the future. We'll probably look to make more of it available, but I think we're required by the new code or the incoming code to have 2/3 of the roof area available for PV systems. And we also will investigate certainly PV systems in the parking. And Steve, yeah, we certainly will look at the PV arrays on the side of the building too. We've used those on the sunscreens before and on the shading assemblies. So certainly look at those. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing else, again,
I'm sorry, can I just ask one question?
sure, go ahead.
Are sustainable building techniques cost effective?
I maybe put this to designers. There is a payback, Denise, that we'll look at. So, we're going to look at all the sustainability strategies we can to make this as sustainable as possible. Some of those strategies cost money. Some of them are easy to do, and it's just good building practice, and it's what a lot of people do. So certainly, as we develop this, we'll look at the different strategies, what the costs are, and what the payback might be over 5, 10, 15 years. My understanding is once you sort of get up into or over a 10 or 15 year payback, it sometimes doesn't make sense, but we'll look at each aspect and each strategy to make sure it's economical and sustainable.
Okay, thank you.
Kelly, I'd love to see this project be as green as possible and be a model for others to follow. Certainly, starting to see a theme here tonight, and I'm not surprised. It's it's certainly a huge topic on all the schools and buildings that we're doing right now. So we will address that, and perhaps I'll talk to the designers. The designers do have a sustainable designer on board, specific consultant who will look at that. I think actually, Brian, it's in-house, right? It's Martine. And perhaps we'll talk to the building committee, and sometime during PSR we'll address sustainability as a specific topic to bring to a public meeting.
That's
Yeah,
right,
and
Shane. We've got a department that's ready to jump in and go as far as the community thinks is appropriate for the project.
Absolutely, yeah. So we'll look at that. We hear the comments on that, and we'll certainly address it in more detail with you. The question: will the VOTEC project impact the potential budget for this project? It won't, and we don't believe so. There's nothing that we know that will. That's a project in of itself, and should not impact our project whatsoever. Myra, we have such a unique opportunity with Wakefield Municipal Gas and Light Department also to think about sustainability and energy use. That will benefit us all as ratepayers in addition to taxpayers for the school. So as I said, there are folks from the Gas and Light Department are on our sustainability focus group, and we'll be discussing that with them and how best to link them in with the new project. So thank you, Myra. Anybody else? Okay. So as I said, please check our website again, wakefieldmhsproject.com. We do post all the presentations to the building committee, to the school committee, to the public forums on that website. We do post agendas with Zoom access for all the public meetings, the building committee meetings, which occur every other Thursday. Next one is next Thursday. We also have some of the designs up on there. We'll update that as the design progresses, so you can see some of the design solutions and where we're going with that. And we do have that function for folks to ask questions. So please refer to that website. As I said, the building committee meetings are also posted on the town website, so you can get the information there. And I think that's all I had. Maybe Doug, did you want to add anything?
No, Shane, I think you've covered it all, and thank you to SMMA for being here this evening as well, and kind of covering the ground that you have. I think you've covered it, Shane. I think all of the questions have been excellent. I appreciate the commitment to net zero. I think it is an opportunity for us.
Thank you. Joe, did you?
No, I don't have anything else. Thank you very much. But I also indicate is that, as Shane indicated, our meetings are approximately every other Thursday. And if you do have any input, we have a public participation is allowed in the very beginning of each and every meeting. So if you have further thoughts and are interested, you can always join in the public participation for the Permanent Building Committee, School Building Committee meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Also, thank you to Ryan and the folks at WCAT for hosting us tonight. And we hope to see you soon at a building committee meeting or our next public meeting.